Shalom. This morning or today, I'm going to talk about the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews in the Bible, it is the 58th book and it is the 19th book in the New Testament section of the Bible. In the book of Hebrews, there are 13 chapters and 303 verses. When we think about this division of chapters and verses, we started wondering, or we can wonder, if really the writer wrote like that? No. If you write a letter today or an email today, you don't put verses and numbers in that, right? It was written in a prose. In 1227, the Archbishop of Canterbury, his name was Stephanus Langton. He divided the books of the Bible as per chapters. After a couple of centuries, Nathan, a Jewish rabbi, he divided the chapters in verses. That was the Old Testament. Based on his work, Robert Stephanus in 1555 divided each chapters in verses. So it has been a work of three different people who divided the books of the Bible in verses, in chapters. And so we have this Bible which is easily readable, or we can go to a specific verse very easily because of three different people. That is Stephanus Langton, Robert Stephanus, and Rabbi Nathan. Did I say Stephanus? It's Stephen Langton. That is the name of the person, and we are grateful for them. If you think about the authorship of the book of Hebrews, the early church believed that it was written by Paul, but after a couple of centuries people started questioning if really it was a Pauline work. The King James Version, the people who put down the King James Version in 1611 when it was published, they attributed this particular book to Paul. They said the letter of Paul to Hebrews. However, that has been questioned, and people have not definitely known whether it is Paul's work or somebody else's work. If you think of Paul's letters, apart from Hebrew, there are 13 different letters that Paul wrote. If we think about the sequence in the New Testament, it starts with the Romans, that is the letter of Paul to the Romans, and it ends with the letter of Philemon. It's about a slave. If we think about these letters, Paul always starts the letters something like this. For example, in Romans he says, "This letter is from Paul, Jesus Christ's slave, chosen by God to be an apostle and sent out to preach his good news." Most of his letters starts like that. For example, Galatians. The letter is from Paul, an apostle. I was not appointed by any group or by human authority. My call is from Jesus Christ himself and from God the Father who raised Jesus from the dead. That's how Paul starts his letter. But it is also thought about that during the course of early Christianity, it was decided by the church authorities or the leadership of the church that Peter would take the gospel to the Jews and Paul would take the gospel to the Gentiles. This is narrated to us in Galatians. If you think about this particular thought, if we read at Galatians 2, chapter 7, Saw that God had given me the responsibility of preaching the good news to the Gentiles, just as He had given Peter the responsibility of preaching to the Jews. For the same God who worked through Peter for the benefit of the Jews worked through me for the benefit of the Gentiles. In fact, James, Peter, and John, who were known as pillars of the church, recognized the gift God had given me, and they accepted Barnabas and me as their co worker. They encouraged us to keep preaching to the Gentiles while they continued their work to the Jews. Here we see, in a way, that the early church had made a division of labor. Paul would preach to the Gentiles and Peter to the non-Gentiles, that is the Jewish people. And therefore, I don't think, or people think, that Paul was reluctant to write to the Jewish audience, only Jewish audience, because this book is very much directed only to the Jewish audience. It is talking about Jesus being superior to angels, Jesus being superior to Moses, Jesus being superior to Joshua, Jesus being superior to the Old Testament law and regulations and the rituals. And it is directed to those particular Christians who had come from a Jewish background, and they were thinking that so much is there in Judaism. They have a temple, they have rituals. And did we do a right thing leaving all that back and coming into Christendom? They were thinking of going back. And probably Paul, under the pseudonym or without giving his name, he has written this letter. Something that it was probably written by Luke, something that it was probably written by Apollos. But whoever was the writer, he was quite thorough with the Jewish laws and traditions, and he was capable of arguing that Christianity or Jesus, as we have seen, is much greater than what is been offered by Judaism. So this is the book of Hebrews that we are going to go through in a couple of days, probably one chapter at a time. So the author of Hebrews is not known, but I believe it has been prompted and has been anointed and inspired by the Holy Spirit. So God himself is the author of this particular book. He might have used Peter, he might have used Paul, he might have used Timothy, or he might have used Luke, but it has come to us, and we are going to go through this book and see what God has to say to us, and probably what he had to say to the first century Christians. This book probably was written just before the fall of the temple, before the destruction of the temple, maybe between 64 to 68 or 69. And if you think about Paul being the writer, then it talks in the 13th chapter that the Christians from Italy, most probably Rome, they are sending greeting. Those are the ending verses. And one of the last verses also talks about Timothy. And it tells us that Timothy has been released from the jail, and he is going to come and meet me, and if he comes early, then I will bring him to you. He intended to take Timothy along with him, whoever is the writer, along with him to meet the believers so that they can meet again. So God bless. Let us move on to the next chapter and see what God has in store for us. God bless. Thank you.